Executive Education. And I am absolutely delighted to welcome you to the school this evening. Vital Topics is our flagship talk series, and we've been running it for 50 years now. So it's fantastic to be here again this evening, and we've got a great night ahead of you. So tonight we're going to be looking at sustainable manufacturing, and we're going to look at what it takes to go from good to great in terms of manufacturing. And we have some fantastic speakers here. Tonight's event came about because of a partnership that we have with Vidrala in terms of executive education. So we're partnering with Vidrala on a major executive education program for their talented and ambitious managers. And the idea is that we're helping to educate them in a collaborative way so that they can become the future leaders of the business. As part of this partnership, we are honoured that we have Gallo Alvarez and Fikra O'Donnell, who have both travelled to be with us today. So thank you, gentlemen, for making the effort to be here. We also have colleagues from University of Manchester in Claudia Henniger and Chris Smith as well. So just in terms of some introductions to the panel. So Gallo Alvarez is Corporate Sustainability Director at Vidrala. Gallo's real focus is sustainable profitability and risk management. He's got a long background in terms of business, previously working in private equity, as well as working on a number of different boards and strategy execution across a wide range of different sectors. Fikra O'Donnell is Sustainability Director at NSERC. So NSERC are part of the Vidrala Group. Fikra joined NSERC in 1998 and has since had various roles within the organisation, varying from planning to sales to marketing and sustainability, which is his latest role, where he was appointed Sustainability Director in 2020. Claudia Henniger is joining us again with a number of different hats on, I think it'd be fair to say, Claudia. She's the research lead at Creative Manchester, Creative Industry and Innovation and Resourceful Futures Challenge Lead here at the University of Manchester. And her research is really centred around sustainability in the circular economy, but more specifically around collaborative consumption in the fashion industry, which is a very topical area around sustainability. Delighted to say facilitating tonight's discussion is my colleague Chris Smith. I work very, very closely with Chris. Chris is a senior lecturer in critical systems in supply chains in the business school, but he is also head of business engagement and leads on a number of our partnerships that Chris and I work together on. Chris's research is really focused around decision making and how decision makers take those complex decisions through facilitation. He also looks at how we build models looking at around those decisions, how those decisions are made. So tonight promises to be a fascinating evening. We're going to hear more about the challenges when it comes to being sustainable, but also looking at legislation, reporting, and that all-important journey to carbon neutral, with a lot of organisations are looking at. We will ask for questions from the audience, so we're going to start with speakers doing about 10 minutes in terms of their specialist subjects, and then it's over to you, both people in person and people online. So Becky will be around and about with the microphone, so please put your hand up for questions. And then we have Abby, who is facilitating the discussion online this evening. So please type your questions at the bottom of the screen, and Abby will be asking those questions in person. So that's it in terms of the introduction. I'd now like to hand over to Chris, who will be facilitating proceedings.
Thank you, Stuart, and welcome to everyone. It's great to see a sea of faces across the room, some students, some colleagues from Vidrala, who, of course, we spent the entire day with on our exec program over the road. And so it's great to kind of take that discussion that we've been talking around supply chains and operations and the future of manufacturing. And particularly at the end, we looked at sustainability and supply chain management and bring that topic here into the main business school, and obviously get experts from the university and also senior leaders from Vidrala and NSERC. So as Stuart has said, each of the three speakers here will have around 10 minutes to kind of give an opening address. I've got a bunch of questions to ask, and I really am hoping that people online and people in the room, our roomers and our zoomers, should we say, can ask some questions and put them and really challenge the panel. So I'll start with Fikra O'Donnell, who is the Sustainability Director for NSERC, part of Vidrala, who's going to kick us off with 10 minutes. And we've 10 minutes, right? 10 minutes. We've got a stopwatch. 10 minutes on sort of what's happening in NSERC.
Thank you, Chris. I suppose before we start, we should explain what we do in the Vidrala Group. I see many of you sitting with glass bottles there, and that's exactly what we do. We manufacture glass bottles for the food and beverage industry. And I think when we talk about food and beverage, and especially packaging, plays an integral part in food and beverage. And there's probably three standout things that exist in that space. And it could be summarized, I suppose, as taste, health, and the environment. And I guess there's not going to be too many people here would argue with me if I said that things always taste better out of a glass bottle. I mean, everybody knows that. When it comes to health, then, I think it's been quite startling, especially from last summer in particular, when the Minto Monaco report was published on the concerns about other packaging, what's contained within those. And then quite recently as well, the Food Packaging Forum put out quite a damning and really concerning report when it comes to our health and food packaging. And that brings us then on to the environment. I suppose glass is uniquely positioned in being one of those materials that is infinitely recycled, or recyclable, I should say. You can make a bottle, you can put it in a furnace, you can make a bottle, and you can do that forever. You get no loss of material in that. So that makes it quite unique. That process, however, of manufacturing that bottle is quite energy intensive. And that's one of the big challenges that we have in the glass industry and trying to address. I think give you a wee bit of a history then on NSERC. NSERC started as Quinn Glass in 1998 in a little place called Derrylin in Fermanagh in Northern Ireland. Now, if you think of business models, right, you would not position anything where we're positioned, especially not a glass plant, but clearly it has worked for us. And that plant manufactures glass containers. In 2005, we opened another plant in Elton in Cheshire, just outside Chester there. That plant is quite unique and still quite unique globally in that not only do we manufacture glass containers, it's twice the size of the plant in Fermanagh, but we also fill beers, wines, ciders, soft drinks are all filled at that site. The history of the company was quite good at that point, but like all these things, our owner at the time, Sean Quinn, lost control of the business in 2011, and we went into a private equity space for a number of years. Thankfully, we were saved from that when Vidrala came in and purchased the business. Immediately, they set about investing in the business and developing the business further, and they continue to do that for us, which is just wonderful because if I even take back to 2023, we purchased the park in Bristol, and the park is complementary to the filling facility that we had in Elton, which is, it also fills. So probably, you know, 1 in every 2, 1 in every 3 bottles of wine that we now consume in the UK actually comes through us in some way. We take that wine in from all over the world in big tanks, and we put it into a bottle that we have manufactured in site. Carbon footprint story of that is extremely good. RAP a number of years ago told us that every bottle we fill in the UK, as opposed to filling in the home country, saves about 170 grams of carbon per bottle. So, come and have a bottle of wine, think positive about it, you're doing something good for the environment. Now, realizing the challenge from a sustainability perspective, over the last number of years, we've been working on our sustainability strategy called Glass Made Good. And it'll come as no surprise to anybody within the industry that we have our 4 Ps that sit off that: people, place, planet, and prosperity. And I could just give you a wee bit of an introduction to each of those. Prosperity is, I suppose, a reflection of the responsibility that we must have And I think Arnold Schwarzenegger expresses this really good in the foreword to 39 Ways to Save the Planet, that book, where he says, we can't wait on the governments of the world to solve the issues. We must do that ourselves. The people of the world must do that. So we stepped up, developed our own strategy, and looked at the responsibility piece under prosperity. But we also must remember from a sustainability perspective in that to have an effect on the people, place, and planet, we also must be a profitable business. But we must do that in the right way. That's an enabler for everything else that we work on. And speaking of those other things, then if we take place, for example, included in place, we have things like community engagement, we have biodiversity, we have water, we have product stewardship, and we're a manufacturing company. What does biodiversity have to do with this? But think about most of our customers. They're involved in the food or the beverage industry. They're reliant on products growing in the field. Most of them have their own nature-based strategies. So it was wonderful from them whenever we came, spoke to them and said, oh, by the way, we have a platinum accreditation for protection and development of biodiversity. Now that biodiversity focus that we have also allows us a great input into community engagement. If I take our Dairy Lynn plant, for example, we have 10 projects running this year with schools, looking at ponds, flowers, bug hotels, green walls, all those kinds of activities. And kids are picking the importance of nature up quite quickly. One funny little story about that one school that we were working with, there was a bit of quietness during the day. Some of the boys were way off playing a match. Some of the girls were left. Teacher encouraged them to get on their coats and get out and start picking all the salad leaves and so on that they had. They brought them in, they washed them, they got all ready. The teacher said, I'm going up to the shop and I'm going to buy some nice bread and ham and we're going to have a feast. No way, miss. Well, what do you mean? You just picked that out of muck. We're not eating that. The perception of what kids had. These are kids from the country in Ireland, did not want to eat salad leaves because they had just picked it out of muck. All right. So it was a big learning there. It's a big impact on us. In terms of planet, I mean, Dr. Jan Kuznetsov from Cognizant talked about the carbon tunnel focus. We can't just think about carbon. We have to think of all the other things. We can solve carbon, but we'll have a big impact in terms of people and planet. But we still have to solve the carbon issue. That could be logistics. Bottles are heavier. So what alternatives do we have for moving bottles around? Bring wine into the country instead of filling it. There's one. Move product by rail. There's two. Change the fuel that we're using on our trucks. There's three. You know, think about all these different routes that we have to market. Can we standardize or rationalize or reduce those somewhat that we're not having that big an impact? We also have a big challenge in terms of the fuel that we're going to use in our furnace. We use natural gas at the minute. What about hydrogen, electricity, biomethane, biodiesels? What's that combination that's going to work for us? And resource efficiency is another important one in there. One of the biggest things that we mentioned it already about the recyclability of glass. Glass 100% recyclable. Yet in the UK, we're rubbish collecting it again. I'll give you some figures. In 2021, 2.581 million tons of glass were put in the market in the UK. The remelt industry that we work in got just over about 970,000 tons of that back. That's 37% went back in. 256,000 tons went to export. We're solving somebody else's problem. 500,000 tons went into aggregate. That's sand substitution and so on. And 700,000 tons, just shy of, went into incinerators and landfill. What an absolute waste of a resource. That's just glass. Add paper, add metals, add plastics into that as well. We need to get better. Let's make an exception in the UK. Wales are bloody good at doing this. Why don't we learn from them and do what they're doing? And that brings us to our last P, which is people. People development, health and well-being, equity, diversity, and inclusion. I've left it last, but I think it's absolutely the most critical piece of what it is that we can do. We're waiting on the big solutions in the world, but whilst we're waiting on those, there's so much more that we can do. For example, what's the best way to have our energy solution? Well, let's not use it in the first place. How do we do that? Be more efficient in our processes. We get people involved in our business, that we start thinking differently on how we run projects that we've done in the past. I'll finish with a final thought from Dr. Victoria Hirth from the Cambridge Institute of Sustainability Leadership. And we've talked about sustainability. I've taken you through the 4 Ps purposely to show that we're not just focusing on one aspect of sustainability, but we're trying to make this as broad as we possibly can. And Victoria's challenge to us all is when we talk about sustainability, we should talk about long-term well-being for all.
Excellent, thank you, Peter. Really appreciate that kind of look into NSERC and obviously the strategy that's going on in there. And I think having worked with them today, there is a difference between kind of the Vidrala and the NSERC story. So I think it would be great to hear both of those perspectives. But next, I really want to turn to my colleague Claudia. She joins us over from the Material Sciences Department over in the Faculty of Engineering. So she's part of the University of Manchester, but she is a welcome guest here in the business school, and she's going to give us 10 minutes on kind of current research trends and sort of areas that are really exciting in her area. So thank you very much, Claudia.
So first of all, thank you so much for your introduction, because I think it actually links quite nicely to research. I knew that, because normally, like when you come to those meetings and you've got panels, and then sometimes it's like, well, you've got people from industry, both of them look at glass, and then you've got somebody from fashion who's almost the odd one out. So what does fashion actually have to do with glass? Probably not an awful lot, because unfortunately you can't wear it, would be a bit probably problematic with health and safety. But we've got very similar problems. So things that you've highlighted with, for example, packaging. The fashion industry uses way too much of it. There's loads of different areas that are crossing over to the food industry as well. So anything to do with drinks and food and about health and safety, about well-being, about kind of like understanding what are the challenges they also face the fashion industry. Now, one thing that we also have is, for example, like looking at resources and raw materials. So you already highlighted like biofuels, and there's loads of different resources that could make processes more sustainable. But in the fashion industry, like the biggest problem that most people face, especially when you do research on fashion, most people say, well, I'm not fashionable, or I don't do fashion. But actually, if you look at ourselves, all of us are dressed. Everybody got up this morning and said, right, this is what I'm wearing today for whatever reason, whether or not it's about comfort, it's about feeling the empowerment, it's about, you know, just being comfortable in your own skin and saying, right, this is who I am, this is who I want to be. But then when we start to reflect on, well, what does this actually mean? Today, I'm not very much of an advocate, kind of, but kind of not. But if you think about different challenges that we have, especially with synthetics, and where does it come from? So it's petroleum-based. Clearly, this is a massive issue. It's a finite resource. So now we need to think about, right, what can we actually do? Like, how can we dress everyone and make sure everybody can cover themselves? They've got a right to do that. So what can we do? So now we've got research, for example, going on how can we use waste products from the food industry. So whether or not this might be from orange juice, for example. So once you actually fill everything up, you've got the nice orange peels left over. Well, we in the fashion industry, we can use it because we actually make fibers and fabrics out of it. Now you might think, what if I've got this in my wardrobe? Is this not going to rot any second or fall apart? The answer is no, because it has been treated, so it's made to last. Ideally, one of the things that we want to create with research is to actually make it biodegradable. So at one point, if you don't no longer need it, we can actually just put it somewhere and it just decomposes. And then hopefully it's going to be fertilizer for example, plants or anything else. So that's the ideal scenario, but it's quite a lot of different things that we have. So orange peels is one of them. It actually has been used in high street and also high-end brands. There's also things on bacterial cellulose. So again, it was quite fascinating actually doing research with this, because when you hear people's opinions, when they suddenly see a kombucha and kind of like a skin that looks almost leather-like on top, and then you say, well, this is actually living bacteria, but you can't touch it. And everybody's like, ooh, I don't want to have this, because why would I have anything that is like crawling on me? But then it's exactly the same thing that we have on our skin anyway. So we don't see this bacteria, and it's exactly the same one. The only problem with bacterial cellulose at the moment is if you don't treat it and you go outside and it's nice Manchester weather, as it always is, clearly sunshine, perfect weather, 25 degrees. It might be that this bacterial cellulose actually starts to feel a little bit mushy, and obviously this is not particularly great as a feeling what we want to have. So there's challenges with this. But these are things that we're sort of like starting to research and also looking at what have other industries done? So what can we actually do? So when it just highlighted, which, for example, like importing in bulk a drink to then fill it up on plant, well, this would actually be really smart for fashion as well. Bring it in bulk without any of the packaging, come here and then sort of like see, can you actually save any of the packaging? Would it actually be cheaper? Would it be better to actually do all of those different things? Now, again, with health, with kind of like the health and well-being, there's obviously, I'm pretty sure everybody has read that the fashion industry is one of the key industries that has been targeted, especially for human rights violations. There's issues in supply chains. There's a lot of problems that people are now also like researching. That obviously has also been quite a lot of legislation there. But it's also thinking like, how can we actually learn from other industries? What have they done? They also produce in mass. There's a lot of things that happen in other industries. So how can we actually learn from it? How can we actually like apply this to our systems as well? And it's just like thinking and collaborating. So I find it always really interesting when you actually go to speak to people from the industry, even if it doesn't seem to be very connected. There's always something that you can actually see where you say, well, actually, this is a great idea. So maybe you can kind of like implement it, whether or not this might be something of biomimicry, so from biology, if it's something what other people have done in supply chain that is very efficient and very kind of like well-versed, can be adopted as well. So it's quite nice to actually see the similarities and also the challenges that are happening. I think for fashion specifically is also looking at business models and how to implement them. So when we think about, for example, deposit schemes, so originally I'm not from the UK, which you might hear from my accent or you might have seen from my last name. So I'm originally from Germany, and one of the things that we have is a bottle return scheme. So you actually earn quite a lot of money if you return all of your bottles. And it's sort of like thinking, could you actually do the same thing if you do this with clothes? Could you just say, well, you get 50p if you bring your t-shirt back to the retailer once you've done with it, instead of, for example, bringing it to the waste fund and just binning it. And there's a lot of value in the waste, but nobody really makes use of it anymore. And there's a lot of kind of like thought processes behind it. And with the circular economy and having been introduced, there's a lot of there's a lot of good examples and there's a lot of kind of like trial runs, but at the same time, they're very early in kind of like the implementation. There's a lot of things that are being done. But again, it sort of needs the entire supply chain included. And for the fashion industry, it's massive. It's not only in one country, it's in continents, multiple countries. And sort of like looking at how can you actually make it really circular is probably one of the biggest challenges to address.
Thank you, Claudia. Excellent insight again to kind of look at the similarities, but also the differences. And it was really interesting to hear kind of from a material science perspective, kind of some of the future materials and how we might address some of the sustainability challenges. I'm going to turn now to Gallo, who is the Corporate Sustainability Director for Vidrala, again, to give the Vidrala perspective on sustainability.
Okay. So thank you, Claudia, and thank you, AMBS, also for inviting Vidrala for the topics. This flagship event, it's a great place to showcase our thoughts on sustainability. I would have never guessed you are from Germany because of your accent. I think that connects with what I want to say from the beginning of my sort of 10-minute speech, is that when I joined Vidrala just a couple of months ago, I saw a group that had a huge history of success since it started in 1965. It started with an investment of 120k euros in a field that had nothing in the middle of the Basque Country. Through devising megatrends by the time, such as the incoming tourism and Rioja wines started to be exported throughout the world, especially in the US. Some Basque entrepreneurs had the courage to start a business, and by doing so, they did it very methodically, and they started to become one of the best and most efficient glass packaging producers in the industry. And because of that, they were able to build sustainable business in terms of cash generation that allow them to invest on the state of the art of technology at the time. And through times they have been evolving and stayed competitive. And that I see is a way of being sustainable. For sure, I will try not, and also in this conversation, we will try not to stay too much carbon focused in what we talk, but the Vidrala group has been a remarkable group of people that have been able to produce glass in a very, very competitive way. And I see that those competitive advantages, we can turn that into a way of being at the forefront of sustainability in the glass industry as well. Now we are facing a tipping point that our customers have already committed to very ambitious carbon reduction pathways in the sense that our top 3 customers are claiming that they will be net zero by 2030. And we also strive to accompany them in those objectives. For sure, our production processes are very energy intensive. Glass melts at 1600 degrees Celsius. But we have already some technologies that are already in place that we can deploy to be more abating those emissions. And also we are heavily investing in some other technologies that are already demonstrating first of a kind pilot projects. And we are also very much into R&D for future technologies. I want to also tell you about one story. In the past, I was a private equity investor. I had a company that was into the olive oil business. And I had the chance to be in the field of olive oil trees in Andalusia last July. And it was 47 degrees Celsius. It was a heat wave. And you might be aware or not, but some olive oil trees are being watered by some tiny tubes, black tubes, that put the water into the ground by drip. And in that day, a specific day, the water pipes were stored at 2 meters height, or 1.5 meters height, because otherwise, if they were stored on the floor, they would get burned. And that was my aha moment. We're facing really, really tough scenarios already in Spain. We're facing droughts. Even the UN states that if we stay at the 1.5 degree scenario, which is where we are all heading in Spain, we will have each year a 2-month drought. If we abide by the 2 degrees Celsius scenario, we will have a 4-month drought. And if we don't do nothing, which is more or less 3 degrees scenario, we will have almost the whole of the year in drought in Spain, which is dramatic. And you could see the river right across that olive oil field was completely dry, and it had illegal water pipes made out of plastic, just for the metal detectors not to detect those pipes. And the people were watering the fields illegally at night, and there was a huge war for the water. And I think this is getting serious. It's time to act. We cannot hide our head in the sand like ostriches anymore. And in order to do that, we have a specific strategy that starts with the 4 Ps that Fikra explained before. But also behind those 4 Ps, we have real projects with people leading those projects with capex and budgets assigned deadlines. And we are industrial people from the Basque Country, and also we are industrial people from Ireland, from the UK. Lately, last year we acquired also and there's some people from Brazil, so we've got different clubs. We learn from each other, and we are stronger. No, we have got the right capabilities to become, I would say, the leader in sustainability in the glass packaging industry.
Thank you to our three speakers. I will open up the questions either from the room or from the Zoom. But I've got a couple of questions I want to ask first, if that's okay. So AMBS and Vidrala, both are celebrating their 60-year anniversary next year in 2025. What have been kind of recent sustainability trends? When did it start in Vidrala and Insert's history? When did sustainability start to kind of come along as something you're really taking focus on? And then once you guys have had a chance to talk about that, I'll ask Claudia around kind of recent sustainability trends in more broadly.
Well, probably kicked off, I would say, 10, 12 years ago. And it was more a sense of, there's this thing sustainable. What is it? What should we be doing about it? No idea. What are we going to do then? And so we kicked it off first off with speaking to business in the community. I'm not sure if everybody's aware of them, but they're in the UK and Ireland, and they're what's called the Responsible Business Network. And so we spent some time with Dr. Lisa McElvenna, who's the Deputy MD of the ITC in Northern Ireland. And she had developed a module at that point called CORE. And CORE took me through all these different aspects, like being a responsible leader, looking at biodiversity, looking at people development and so on, and really introduced that concept that sustainability is not just that single focus. So that was our first foray into it. And I suppose from that point, we've been continually developing what that looks like. You know, we still have the kind of the concept of what CORE was, but as Gallo alluded to there, there's subsections behind that now, which is getting into the nitty-gritty of it, and then another section back, which is taking it down another level. What we do try and challenge those who are leading the projects that we're at is to be transformative as much as they can on it, not just to see what's there and just try and improve, but we really have an impact and try and change. And I think, and Gallo was very good at mentioning this insofar as one of the best ways of doing that is looking at Brazil, is looking at plants in Iberia, is looking at all our different plants and harnessing that information and knowledge that we all have and getting that together to what we can improve.
Well, I would say that we have been sustainable in a way without knowing it since 1965 when Vidrala was born. There was this very interesting picture that I showed last week to my colleagues, which was the Beatles giving their first concert in Spain in 1965. Rubber Soul was released that year, and Spain was opening to tourism, you know, and at the same time, the Rioja wine was being exported, and those, as I said before, were the mega trends that made Vidrala be what it is today, no? And I would say that glass has evolved hugely since then. Glass is 30% lighter than 50 years ago. It consumes 70% less energy, and it emits 50% less CO2 than 50 years ago. Now we're facing this tipping point that we are required to do that much instead of in 50 years, we have to do it in 10 to 15 years, which is a huge challenge. But with the right technology in place, with the right people, the right commitment and willingness to invest, which we have, we will for sure make it as we have always made it in the past.
Right, if you could kind of tell the room some recent trends in sustainability, kind of more broadly, to maybe play off some of the things that's been mentioned.
I actually think like it's quite interesting when you said sustainability has been ingrained without actually knowing that we're doing it. And I think this is also something that is quite cultural, because a lot of different cultures actually have done this for forever. And it's something like that people just generally do. And I'm pretty sure everybody has acted very sustainably, even if you don't know. So it might be something like hand-me-downs or just wearing, I don't know, a sweater from someone else. And it's something that we do very unconsciously. But then when somebody, for example, like I did a couple of interviews with people before and I said, so can you define what sustainability is? Normally it's like very complex. People don't like, they understand what it is. But if you actually think about how do you define it, it's probably quite tough. And I'm pretty sure if I would ask the question now, I would get a different answer from absolutely everyone. And that's kind of normal because we all understand it very differently. But it's sort of like how we deal with it and what we actually do with it. So in the industry, I mean, like in the fashion industry, we're now starting to look at different materials. We're looking at different business models. We're trying to improve, but we're also trying to reduce as much as possible. I was just talking with somebody before about upcycling, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. But it's again, just like making use of skills that almost have gotten lost. So in the UK, we used to have, obviously, the fashion industry. Manchester is massive. Still for the fashion industry, but there's a huge history in Manchester alone about like cotton production, how everything happened. Clearly, there's also some challenges with it, but at the same time, we had very skilled workers. We had seamstresses. We had people who knew how to embroider, how to knit, how to sew, how to do all of the different dyeing, whether or not this is with now modern dyes or traditional dyes. And I think it's just thinking back of what did we actually know? And how can we get this knowledge back? Because I think gaining this knowledge back will actually help us to also overcome a lot of the challenges that we currently have. Because we've almost forgotten on how good things, some of the things at least were, and how we could actually change this with, as you highlighted, with like 1.5 degree lifestyles and all of those different areas that we actually need to consider and rethink. But I think, particularly, you also mentioned this before with the industry, the regulations and everything else, like, who is actually responsible for it or who should actually start it? And I feel it's always like a chicken and egg question, because if one party doesn't do it, well, the other party might not start it either. And it's sort of like almost like seeing that we're all on the same playing field, we're all working towards the same goal. And that's the most important thing to remember.
It's a really great point to end on. I was listening to a podcast at COP, and it was people talking about supply chain, and they're saying, you know, who are the adults in the room here? Who are the people that are actually going to lead the change? Is it going to be governments? Is it going to be through regulation? Or is it going to be businesses? Or is it going to be consumers that are kind of driving that change? And kind of they were saying, you know, we're all here and it's great, but no one's standing up and saying, I'm going to be the adult in the room and drive this conversation forward. But to drive the conversation forward, Claudia, could you talk to us about, you know, maybe some future trends that you see that are going to be coming over the horizon? Where is it heading in fashion and more sustainability more broadly?
I think there's a lot of digital innovation that's currently happening. So whether or not this might, like in fashion, we've got a lot of talk about, for example, like digital fashion. Do we actually need to own something like physically, or is it something that we can have in a digital environment? If you probably ask somebody who's doing life cycle assessment, they'd probably say, well, if this is always a sustainable solution, we don't really know, because there's a lot of electronics involved. But I think with technology in itself, there's a lot of potential that it has, and a lot of challenges probably could be overcome. What those new technologies actually do, we probably don't know yet. Again, also with new materials, there's a lot of things that we probably can't imagine right now. But I'm sure they will come up as well. And I think also, like, looking at other industries, as I said, it's more of a almost like plagiarism from other industries to sort of like say, what have you done? Can you actually do exactly the same? And sort of like have the same thinking process behind it.
Benchmark.
Yeah.
So in terms of oh, we have a question. Someone itching to ask a question. Yeah, sure. We'll have a microphone coming, so people
is that easier? Hello, Zoom. My name's Sally G. I'm lecturer here at Manchester Business School. I've just got a question for all of you, really, on the back of that. What does green sustainability into corporate strategy mean for you, and what do you think are the main challenges to achieving that? Going back to the adults in the room and who's responsible, how do you do it?
Go over to our corporate sustainability directors who are in charge of that sustainability strategy to start that off.
I would say that the sustainability strategy is fully ingrained and is at the center of our corporate strategy. And it starts with the board of directors and the executive committee. And it boils down to the whole of the organization. There is a sustainability team with Fikri and I and some others. But in reality, we are all responsible for sustainability in the whole of the company. You know, it's in all of our actions, it's in specific projects that are being assigned to different departments. And not only different departments, we have multidisciplinary teams addressing specific problems. As I said before, we've got a process where we share specific projects in 4 pillars. We've got one of our pillars is the glass industry of the future. We've got another work stream on sustainable supply chain. These first 2 are more focused on CO2 reduction of the emissions. But then, for me, more importantly, we've got a single work stream with subgroups on people, and also we've got another one on the communities and environment. Because why I say the people one is the most important, because we see that in the end, technological problems will be eventually solved. We're quite savvy in terms of technology, and we will eventually get there. Maybe we will not be the first. Maybe we will be the first. Who knows? But we will eventually get there. But in the end, what makes us different and unique and maybe leaders in the glass industry is the people that make Vidrala. And we have to be very, very aware of that and make that sustainable for the future. And that's also part of the strategy.
I was going to say that I'm involved in various committees in Northern Ireland in particular. It's a small place, as we know. And I get wonderful opportunity to go and speak to so many different companies now who are all trying to do something in sustainability and just have no idea. And I was with a company one day and the guy said to me, do you know our sustainability strategy is now our business strategy? And I can get that. I see the way that people within our business respond when you ask them to do something because it has an impact in nature, as opposed to we should do this because, that will add 50 grand to the bottom line or whatever. The motivations are different. People seem to really relate to motivational things. And I think by default end up doing stuff as a result of that.
For me, it's all about relatability. So it's quite a nice keyword to sort of finish off as well. But I think it's great that a company does something, but if the people who are actually buying products don't buy into it or don't see the benefits of it, why would you do it? So just from fashion, there's a common perception that, for example, if something has been produced sustainably, it's expensive. The thing is, though, it doesn't really have to be expensive. Or if it is more expensive, what is the benefit of it? And I feel it's the communication, so it's a storytelling process that really needs to come in. So whether or not this might be, what if there's less chemicals involved in, for example, producing a jumper, and that actually then gives you less allergies, you've got less health problems. Well, you might say, well, actually, yeah, I'm investing in this. It's, I don't know, £5 more than the other one. Of course I'm going to do this. Once you sort of buy into this product and everybody says, well, I want to have this really good jumper too, it's benchmarking it again. So it's coming, it's getting everybody on the same playing field, but it's more about storytelling and actually making sure that people are buying into the concept and seeing this is the benefit that you're getting out of it. And there's a real benefit there for you. And once it is communicated, I feel that's also part of kind of a company strategy, but then also communicating it out.
I think there's a big part of that where, and it's one of the questions I've heard so many times in sustainability panels, but sustainability is expensive. And if we look at what the solutions are now for fuels, for example, for the future, they are expensive, but they may not be in the future. But I think if we think of sustainability as well as not wasting, then all of a sudden we're starting to get back into these concepts that businesses have been professing for years. But why would we waste people, materials, energy? Why, whenever we walk out of this room, do the lights not switch off automatically instead of somebody coming in here tomorrow morning and the lights and the air conditioning still being on? So thinking sustainably doesn't have to be expensive in that respect.
Okay, so I've got a question. I will come to the room again for some more questions in a few moments, so get them thinking. I've got some students in the room that I'm sure are going to ask some great questions. But as directors of sustainability, you have to move this giant ship somewhere, and sometimes I think it kind of picks up on the questions from the room. The way that has been done is you set some ambitious target, and it might be, tying into a national target. It might be something to kind of nail your hat, nail the flag to the pole, so to speak. How do you go about setting ambitious targets that are achievable, but are actually going to move the dial, in terms of getting buy-in from your company and changing behavior?
I think the big target really that sits out there above all others is the science-based targets initiative. We had 2 targets previously, the 2 degree, well below 2 degrees. There's now the 1.5 degree target. So if you don't know about science-based targets, they were set up after Paris 2015, as the name suggests. They're a methodology used for industry to determine what you need to do to make sure that we don't breach the 1.5 degree target by the year 2100. And of course, we're failing miserably on that respect as we stand at the minute. That's probably the benchmark. I know SBTi have come in for a bit of criticism this week when we talk about offsetting and so on, but hopefully they'll gather themselves up and get back in line again. But the targets are immense. Targets are really difficult. The targets are going, for us in particular, let's say, we're reliant on so many things to happen to allow us to do that. We're reliant on government policy. We're reliant on change of habits. We're reliant on coming up with new fuels. We're relying on designing and building new furnaces. They will all come. And we're very clear we have a focus on it. When they come, we'll be the challenge.
And for me, it's also really helpful thinking in terms of technology readiness. So we have a full set of already deployable technologies that we have room for deploying further into the organization, and they are already aligned with being competitive. I always put the example in Vidrala. It's the toilet paper example. The sustainable toilet paper in the 2000s was brown, and you could even get hurt, and it was twice as expensive as the good one. So only the fanatics of sustainability were buying those. And we don't want to be manufacturing brown toilet papers. We want to manufacture the right bottles at the right emissions and demonstrating this ambitious direction that we have set ourselves in. And eventually we will get there. It is true that there are some uncertainties regarding certain technologies. Some others are already deployable, as I said before. Some others are currently being tested in first-of-a-kind pilot projects, and we are monitoring them closely. And some others are part of the portfolio. So you had some VC investments, those were maybe the R&D projects that might be successful, but they might not be. But it's part of the history of glass, and it has always been. I'm confident enough that we will eventually meet the targets, and we are for sure putting in the effort and also collaborating with our customers.
It's funny how the initial 2 comments there, we defaulted immediately to carbon.
Yeah.
So, when we look at sustainability holistically, then, or being a responsible business, if you like, wonderful conversation earlier on EDI and setting targets for diversity within the business and what that should look like as well. That's an important part to play in it. Likewise, in terms of nature, what are we doing to protect, develop nature? There's a wonderful documentary called Kiss the Ground on Netflix. It tells us we can solve a lot of issues in the world today in terms of carbon if we farm differently. So those need to be in there.
Have we got any questions from the audience? Yes, here at the front. One, and then we've got another one at the back there afterwards.
Yeah, I have a question related in both fashion and glass. First, fashion.
They're not mass market. If we are reusing, that's probably one of the best things that we could do at the moment. Having said that, if you look at the waste hierarchy in general, it says reduce, which is the most important thing. So ideally, let's stop buying, which would be ideal, because we do have a lot of fashion items that are around. But then reuse, yes, it is very important. There has been a lot of studies, especially on the second-hand market as well. Having said that, there's also, again, challenges with it, because if you think about social sustainability as well, if you look at who was secondhand fashion targeted in the first instance, people who not only like want to have trendy things, like at the moment, for example, in the UK, it's quite a trendy thing, and it's a badge of honor to actually go into a secondhand market and say, well, we bought something, or we thrifted, we went into a vintage store, and it's something like, it's a nice story to tell. But because of this, the prices have gone up dramatically, and now people are actually not able to afford secondhand clothes anymore, so they must go to shops where it's actually a lot cheaper, and that's most of the time it's firsthand, because if you get a 50p t-shirt, why would you go into a secondhand store that is £3? So it's kind of like thinking about this, but there's a lot of different options. I mean, like there's swapping, there's renting, and there's secondhand, like there's resale, there's loads of different areas of where you actually use second, third, or whatever hand you have. So I feel it's a very important market. I'm hoping it's going to stay there, unfortunately, because of the quality of the clothes, and has deteriorated quite a lot. Again, there's challenges with it, because now when we are having our second-hand garments, unfortunately, it can't all be sold in the UK. So then they're shipped off to other countries where it becomes quite a big problem. So it's kind of like also looking at, if it can't be reused anymore, do we have actually the recycling option? If you don't have it at the moment, that's probably where we're needing to invest. So we need to find out a lot more.
I would say in our case, it's a bit different. There's not a one size fits all, because reusable glass is heavier, and it also makes sense in certain ecosystems where there is the possibility of having a closed loop supply chain. Because for reused packaging in glass to be reused and be better than single-use glass, has to run through a number of cycles, and in some cases the end user is not putting in the habits to have those cycles be real. No, a very important soft drinks manufacturing was telling me that people from the Eureka channel were putting the reusable bottles into the glass tanks. Also, they are having huge problems with the increase of water usage by rinsing those bottles to be put back into the production and refilling lines. But in some cases, it makes sense, and it's also an strength of glass, because we are the only part of the material that is being capable of being reused. So it's an opportunity, also a challenge, but it makes sense in certain situations.
It's probably a wonderful concept in the UK, where we think that a refillable milk bottle being delivered in electric milk float is a wonderfully new idea.
Yeah.
We have another question at the top here, and then we'll take one off Zoom and then one here, and then up maybe. Yeah.
Hi, this is Riaz Hamid from Formix Technologies. I'm also a approved supplier of Manchester University as a software provider. So the question is, so you have, being a responsible business, you talked about the technology investments and piloting the software. So those investments, do you think you consider wastage? For example, you have your production system, you have your own waste before even we take the recycling from external resources. You have your own manufacturing, like production systems, and you have your own wastage. Do you consider yourself have technology in place which takes care of those wastages without too much of treatment?
So from a glass perspective, we have processed waste. So, you know, if we identify a defect in the bottle, be it a crack or inclusion or whatever, we have a closed loop system. Bottle rejected, goes back out, gets pushed out and brought back into the system. So that works perfectly well for us. So we do. The problem, I suppose, is we have those bottles in the first place. So that's where technology will kick in and help. How do we solve creating those bottles that we have to reject through the process? And I think that's a big part of that will be utilization of data, because we have loads of data. We just don't use it well enough yet.
Jim? Jimmy is going to give us a question from Zoom.
Yeah, but of questions come in. The first one, there's two actually.
Yeah.
I'll ask them both. The first is for all the panel. How do you drive cultural change in individuals to embrace these sustainable practices? And what approaches have you found in encouraging people to actually change their behavior? So that's for one question. And the second one, pretty more just for Gallo actually, is in 10 years, what achievements will be derived from your current strategy? So what do you think will be the actual benefits in 10 years? So, yeah. But the first one was about the culture.
So if I go with the first one, right, there's a lovely quote. I know it's not specifically related to this, but it's from Werner Myers, which is diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. And I love that quote on the basis that it's by getting people involved is how we'll encourage that development. So it's doing things like addressing maybe their challenges. So we ran a program called Grit in the Shoe. So if you can imagine, you've got that little stone in your shoe and it's annoying the hell out of you. But does anybody ever give you the opportunity to express that? Get it out there, and then somebody can fix it for you. And all of a sudden, you start fixing these little grits, and people's perception, attitude, involvement, inclusion, activity suddenly changes. We did the first year of Grit. We had almost 500 complaints. Let's say we did the second year of it. And the vast majority of the responses in the second year were suggestions, not complaints. Because it showed that we were listening to what people wanted to do. And then I think you've got to create the space for people to be involved in activity. So one of the things, I coach a couple of people in sustainability space, and the consistent problem they bring it. And bear in mind, a lot of these people that are in these space now are young people into a business. They maybe have only graduated a couple of years and they've been landed and they're trying to get a space in there. And they say to me, I've never any time to do anything. People always come to me with, here's a problem, here's an issue, I'll leave it with you, you can sort it. And I think what I try and encourage them to do is try and get in there before they finish and say, right, how can I help you deliver on that issue that you have and get that ownership back? And we have seen that with the biodiversity committee that we have. It went from 4 people, it's now sitting at 45 people. Because when somebody comes with an idea or suggestion, brilliant, come and present it and we help you deliver it. So I think that's probably the best way to do it.
Okay, so answering also the question, the second question, I envision, well, first of all, I'm not, this is maybe a controversial answer, but not a big fan of the reduced part of the sustainability, because taking it to the extreme, I have got friends actually from Germany that they are very sustainability fanatics, no? And taking it to the extreme, they decided not to have any children because they recognize that having children is going to be bad for the planet, no? And for me, it's striking a balance, no? And in that sense, glass is about enjoying life, enjoying the happiest moments of our life, drinking a bottle of wine or having a beer in a glass bottle with friends and enjoying life in the end. And if we can make that through having bottles that have been produced without any emissions, that are lighter in weight, that are still beautiful in different colors, different shapes, in a material that has been with us more than 5,000 years. It's inert, does not react chemically internally with the contents of the bottle or outside with the environment. I think it's the ultimate packaging material that helps us enjoy life and consume responsibly.
I have a question for Claudia. We're here with an industry partnership, university partnership relationship. And I'm keen to hear from you, what type of industry collaborations and joint university working have we got going on as an engineering and in a business school on sustainability in this space?
I think there's a lot of different collaborations already happening, but there's also a lot of opportunities. So personally, I'm a huge fan of interdisciplinary research, and I think Gallo, you already mentioned this with like interdisciplinary teams. Because obviously when you think about your own ideas, you can only have so many. But then if you talk to someone else, they might have some, might come from a completely different field, and they might actually tell you something where you think, oh yeah, I haven't really thought about this. And it's about finding kind of like the puzzle pieces to actually look at a problem and then find solutions. I find it super fascinating, especially then when you go out to the industry and say, well, we do actually have, theoretically speaking, something, but does it really work in practical terms? And this is probably one where academia and industry have probably had the biggest issues, because on the one hand, it's like, well, it's super theoretical, and on the other hand, well, that's practical, but does it really work for everyone? So it's kind of like finding, again, like this really nice balance, but there's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of different research that is going on. So whether or not this is in fashion or in any of the other industries, it's just making sure that we can actually talk about it, and that we find opportunities to sit around the table and actually have those discussions and really say, what is your problem and how can we help you address it?
There's a wonderful connection, I suppose, between academia, agriculture and industry kicking off in Northern Ireland at the minute. It's led by Professor David Looney from Queen's. He led a study into agricultural waste. It's Northern Ireland's biggest emitter. It's agriculture, 27% or something like that. But what David has researched with his guys is that if we could look, we've about 1.9 million people in Northern Ireland, right? We've about 1.7 million cows, 700,000 pigs, 2 million sheep, 25 million chickens. We've 9.2 million tons of animal slurry. Add green waste to the top of that, and we have enough potentially to develop anaerobic digestion to make us self-sufficient in terms of our gas usage. Now, how wonderful would that be? So, but it's a matter of taking the study that's done now and turning it exactly with it. Thankfully, the newly appointed Minister for the Economy in Northern Ireland thought it was a really good idea to bring David Looney in as one of his advisors on decarbonizing the economy. So that was a super start.
And so the challenge comes from taking the research ideas and then operationalizing it, and how and where does the money come from? And of course, that's always the challenge. But it's kind of great to have those collaborations where you can have a bit of space and a bit of time of the institution to think about the problems, but also we get to collect the real world data and kind of learn from industry and industry learn from the university. Yeah, we have a question here in the middle of the room. Thank you.
Thanks for the knowledge sharing session. I'm learning a lot of work from this session. I'm quite interested in the sustainability problem in the fashion industry, because I'm the person, Dr. Claudia mentioned, not fashion, but quite interested in this industry. And I learned lots of examples. Those brands, those companies believe they are sustainable. For example, the fast fashion brand, Zara, they try to recycle the material. They have a trading activities and donation activities to try to recycle those materials, try to reuse this product. So they believe they are the sustainable company, sustainable brands. Actually, a lot of people practice that actually the fast fashion brand existing leads to a large amount of waste, because the product lifespan reduce and the purchases frequency increase. So it's hard to say they are sustainable or not. So my question is, from the business side, from the company side, are there any real sustainable practice or example or successful cases that you can share with us?
So it's a very good question. And I'm going to answer this with a quote that I got from one of my participants, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. So that specific person was having an upcycling business. So basically just using other people's waste and apprentices and creating new collections out of it. So they got donations and then created something and tried to sell it to obviously then also have like people who could give skills for. And it's a really nice business. And they said, well, we have about 100 customers. We can't go we can't scale up, because that would mean like we need to go out, like there's like loads of different challenges with it. But it's also to source all of the materials within a 20-mile radius. And they said, if you get it within 20 miles, perfect, this is what we're doing. But they said, well, we get 100 people that we can sell our things to. And there's 100 people who might sort of like say, right, we are quite sustainable. But that doesn't really make an impact, because there's 100 people that you're serving. If you like, going with your example, if you look at a fast fashion brand, even if it's just the tiniest amount that they do, they serve millions of people. So it's a small step in the right direction. Is there anything else that they could do? Yes, absolutely. But it's sort of like looking at the tiny steps and sort of like saying it's also, as consumers, I think we've been quite critical. So if a brand actually does something that is really, really good, we automatically say, yeah, but they do so many things wrong. And that's right. But at the same time, it's also about celebrating, because a lot of brands now don't actually tell you what they do for the sustainability agenda anymore, because they're saying, well, if we do that, we're absolutely getting scrutinized for everything that we are apparently doing wrong, even though we're trying to go on the right path. So to answer your question, are there brands to do something that are 100% sustainable? I would say you probably never find one, because sustainability changes. There's loads of innovation, there's loads of different things. There's loads of, like if you think about what was sustainability like 60 years ago and what is sustainable now, it's very different, and there's huge discrepancies in between. I think that there's quite a lot of schemes where you can buy, for example, like t-shirts, and at the end of the life, you can scan the QR code and you can send it back to the same company, and they make it into a t-shirt again, because they say, we know what it is, and we know where it comes from, we know how it was dyed. So for them, it's super easy to have this closed loop. But again, there's also other challenges with it, because then you need to sort of like make sure that the consumer buys in, they actually send it back, that it's not damaged, that there's not anything else like on it that we can't then really say, or we can't recycle it anymore. So I would say like any step that a company does towards sustainability is the right step, but it's always kind of like making sure that you are innovating yourself and that you're not stopping and not stagnating, but you actually move it forward all the time.
I think, Chris, the point that you made there in not reporting, not saying, is a really, really important one. Because one of the things I think we rely on in sustainability is, you mentioned earlier about the plagiarism. Well, that's what we need to do.
Exactly.
You know, if somebody has developed something that's a good idea, we need to just do that. We don't need to go back to step one and try and start all over again. So I'm all in for, if somebody has a good idea, take it and use it.
I've got a good example to hopefully not answer the question fully, but act as an example. So we're working with a company called Nobody's Child. Now, obviously, a lot of the discussion today has been around the environmental sustainability, which of course makes sense. Nobody's Child and my PhD student at the back, Deepak, is the person who kind of managed this relationship from the beginning. They're called Nobody's Child because they want nobody's child involved in production of their clothing they sell. And it is a sad fact that in most of the textiles industry and the garments industry, we don't know who's involved upstream in the production, in gathering the resources. And in many cases, it's forced labor, exploited labor, and even child labor. So Nobody's Child have developed with Fabicus this technology that is a digital passport, digital product passport that tracks the whole stage of the production, much further upstream than companies would typically audit, with the express goal of removing forced and slave labor in their production process, right the way from gathering materials. So again, you know, with that information, they can also now more easily capture what is the environmental impact. But I think there is that role that technology plays to help us understand. And you know, as consumers, we need to be more intentional with what we're purchasing and what we're buying. But without the information, without the data, we can't be intentional, because even if people want to make good choices, they can't make those good choices if the supply chain's hidden. I think we've got a couple more questions here. Yeah, I see 2 or 3 questions. So yeah, perfect.
Thank you. Just going back to the glass industry and a concept pointed out by Claudia, which is the opinion of the glass industry with regards to deposit return schemes and returnable bottles, and what are the advantages and disadvantages that we see with these kind of systems?
How long have you set aside and you go for that one? We can have a great debate on this one, whether bottles should be included in deposit return schemes or not. Probably suffice it to say the last couple of reports that have been done in the UK in particular would suggest that keeping glass out of a deposit return scheme is and optimizing the extended producer responsibility concept around it is the best way of increasing the amount of recycled glass available to the industry. That's going to be different somewhere. Germany, it's going to be different. They have an infrastructure in place already for deposit return schemes. Ireland introduced a deposit return scheme there quite recently for cans and plastic. I mean, all you have to do is read the reports, and it's an absolute disaster to a degree at the minute. There's machines are always full. There's people traveling between store to store to store to deposit bottles. And think of that for a second. They're traveling between stores to try and bring something back to deposit it. So the concept for plastic or aluminium works for me. You know, you get a lovely clean stream of those materials to go back in and start reusing again. But, you know, let's not talk about our pet at this point and the concerns that exist with it.
I think we've got one more question in the middle, and then I've got a question for all three participants at the end. So, yeah, our last question from the floor.
Okay. First of all, thank you for all of you. My first question is, greenwashing is one of the significant issues that especially or specifically the fashion industry face, or other industries face the same issue. And that brings me to the second point about who's the best options, who's the party that should take the lead of the sustainability or the transformation for sustainable actions. Don't you think that governments and policymakers are the best option to take this lead by legislations and maybe claims checklist for the companies to address the greenwashing?
What do you want to talk a bit about greenwashing in fashion?
So I think it's great because there's so many issues with greenwashing. I do think it is a problem, but it's also like being put to the point where you sort of like say, like it's a highlighted, like some companies don't even tell you anymore like what they're actually doing because they're too scared to sort of like say, this is what we actually do, and somebody says, well, you're greenwashing, full stop. And it's just the criticism of it that a lot of companies are afraid of, that they're now not even like being able to be vocal about something. Whose responsibility is it, and who should monitor it? I think sometimes, like, especially with labels or claims or anything else, we do have an information overload. And even if you've got labels, unfortunately, because we give them out to quite a lot of different industries, like there's, I think, as far as I know, there's only like between 6 to 10 fashion specific labels that you can put on a t-shirt, but who's checking it? I mean, I can purchase one of those labels and say, right, I'm going to put this on my clothes. I purchased it. I might say, I'm very conscious. I'm obviously like checking that everything is in place. But again, Chris also highlighted, sometimes we just simply don't know who is producing things for us. So we might have the best intentions, but it just doesn't work. So a friend of mine, for example, just recently created their own underwear brand because they said, well, we actually want to know like where it comes from. So they're sourcing cotton, I think it's from Greece, where they actually source it from. They've got a company that is now manufacturing everything within the European Union. And it's been so challenging to actually find out like where things are coming from, how you can actually trace it back and what you can do, and how you can actually agree, say like, I know this for a fact. But then it's also thinking, well, if I don't have a label on it anymore, because it's just too expensive for me as a tiny kind of like entrepreneur, first person to do this, I can't put a label on because it's just so expensive. But then would you trust me if I'm saying, well, I'm producing something that's 100% sustainable? Probably not, because like, why would you? You have no idea like who I am. You have no idea if I'm telling the truth or if I'm not telling the truth. And I think this is kind of like going also like to different industries. I think this is a challenge that all industries are facing, because we've been, unfortunately, very critical. Like on the one hand, it's very good to be critical, but on the other hand, we've also been almost like too critical for certain issues that we also like missing celebrating, like I said, like the small successes that we've achieved.
So I've got, I guess, one last question. We're joined, we're here. Vidrala have been with us in executive education, looking at training. And we're joined on the panel by 2 sustainability directors, and we're joined by someone who is teaching sustainability in the university. So, what are the skill gaps? What are the skills that are needed to be a sustainability director? Those people who are in the room as our students, maybe watching on Zoom, as well. You know, what is it they should be doing to have this role that did not exist 10 years ago? It is a new thing. I don't know when the first sustainability director was appointed for Vajrala and NSERC, but you know, this is a new thing. So what are the skills they need? What should they be doing to get there, both from a training perspective for Claudia and for our two sustainability directors on the panel?
I'm not the best example of the skills you need for being a sustainability director, because I'm pretty much an outsider. But I can tell you why I joined Vidrala, no? And I think this is applicable in the sustainability part regarding in regards to people. And I've learned that before I joined Vidrala, I worked for Vidrala as a consultant, and I knew the company before, and I got a hint of the culture of the people, how they behave, and I like that, no? And it boils down to a concept that our CHR officer, Joseba, told me, is that in Vidrala we strive for having the best employee experience. No, the employee experience has to do with having the right resources in the workplace, having the right leadership, leading teams, having also the right education, ongoing education, having the employees engaged and performing at their best. It's normally problems that are not rocket science in many instances, and by having the right motivation, you can perform at the best, no? And for me, that protects you and puts you in a position where you can hire the best talent in every position in the future. So you can maybe hire people, specialists in AI, or some skills that we don't know yet, but we will attract those because of the employees. That's
Claudia, what are you seeing in the classroom, and are you seeing the skill gaps that students are asking for?
I'm going to be super controversial, but I'm going to say somebody who's actually willing to fail. Because I feel, especially when you're in a classroom, there's a lot of pressure on you. Like thinking about university, there's a lot of coursework, there's a lot of exams, there's a lot of anything else. You get graded on absolutely everything. Clearly, you want to have a really good degree. And you're under so much pressure that you're almost forgetting you need to learn how to fail, because once you fail, you then reflect on it and you think, well, what can I actually do differently? And who can I ask to actually do something differently? And just asking those questions. And I feel, unfortunately, like we don't have the room at the moment to really learn how to fail, in order to actually like improve, in order to work with others, in order to have those discussions. And I feel that that's a skill that we need to relearn, to celebrate also and saying like, yeah, I failed, and it's okay that I failed. And it's great because now I've done something that is actually a lot better than when I started off.
I suppose it depends on the maturity of the company that you're moving into. I remember when I started it some time back, whenever we had an exco meeting in some way and I mentioned sustainability, it was hey, here 2 minutes before you mentioned it, kind of thing. Now it's now just a default position for people in the business to talk about it. I think you have to put yourself out there a bit. You've got to speak to people. You know, we talked about the playroom, we talked about stealing ideas. Just go and listen. Events like this, go to universities, go to events where people are talking about it, go and meet people, draw as much as you can from other people's experiences, ideas, suggestions, programs that they've come up with, steal them, take them, use them, try and encourage people when you get into business to be part of it. And I think as I mentioned there, I think sustainability is one of the easiest things that I've seen in business to get people involved in. If people can just really take, but don't be discouraged by it.
So get out there and do it and bang the drum, and don't be afraid to fail.
Be passionate about it.
Yeah, and talk with that passion. Well, I think we're kind of just about out of time. So thank you firstly to everyone in the room. And of course, thank you to our panel members. I'll hand over to Stuart to kind of give the final address. Thank you, Stuart.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So a huge thank you to our speakers this evening. I thought it was a fascinating debate. And so thank you for your range of different insights and views on the topic. Thank you to you all as well for your questions as well. Some really, really insightful questions. And thank you everyone for who's online for your participation as well. In terms of other events, we do have a number of events coming up at the school. One of the best events that we do each year, an event that I really do love, is the annual Grigor McClelland lecture that we hold at the school. Grigor was the founding dean of Alliance of Manchester Business School, and we hold an annual event in his honour, and we're going to be giving that next week. And we've got Ismail Almar, the Executive Vice President for Professional Services for NCR, coming along. So hopefully we'll see you again at that event. But for now, thank you again for attending this evening. And for those joining us in person, safe journey home. Thank you.